What would you do if the daughter of a janitor graduated as valedictorian, only to be kicked off the graduation stage because of an old cotton dress? In a place where every chandelier costs more than a working-class family's entire tuition, where diamonds are considered the standard of dignity, a girl stepped onto the stage not with glitz and glamour, but with brilliance, resilience, and self-respect. But when the heirs of prestige began to laugh, to mock, and tried to erase her from her own moment, they had no idea they were about to witness a stunning reversal. A powerful entrance from her billionaire fiancé, a public reckoning delivered in the middle of a lavish graduation ceremony, and a speech that silenced the entire world. Stay until the end, because the conclusion to this story won't just move you to tears. It'll make you want to rise to your feet and applaud, not for fame, but because justice and dignity have finally returned to where they truly belong. And if you've ever been looked down on simply because you didn't fit in, then this story was made for you. If someone is brilliant but doesn't look the part, do they still deserve to be honored? Or is being poor enough to disqualify you from the stage of dignity? Whitestone Pavilion, the most extravagant graduation venue in America, shimmered that day like an Oscars gala. Massive crystal chandeliers draped the ceilings, velvet-covered chairs glowed under soft lights, and each invitation cost over $10,000. People didn't just come here to graduate. They came to flaunt their status. Among rows of students in silk-lined gowns, diamond-studded earrings, and glossy Italian leather shoes, one girl walked in. Harper Lewis. No designer label. Just a plain white cotton dress, worn down flats, and her hair tied in a rushed bun. Quietly, she took her seat in the front row, a space usually reserved for heirs of Fortune 500 dynasties. No one asked who she was. There were only glances, subtle, piercing, and quietly cruel. And then, as if to validate the sense that something was off, an event coordinator approached. No name check, no verification, just a microphone and a chilling declaration. "I'm sorry, you're not on the speaker list. Please step down from the stage." The room went still as the marble floor beneath them. Even the clinking of champagne glasses stopped. In a hall dressed like Versailles, that voice echoed like a public verdict. Harper said nothing. She simply bowed her head and stepped down, each stare feeling like a mountain carved from judgment. But outside, among the crowd that couldn't afford to enter, one woman was clutching her phone with trembling hands. Angela Lewis, Harper's mother. On the screen, she watched her daughter, the girl who used to study until 2 a.m. just to earn a full-ride scholarship, being removed from a stage that should have been hers, all because of a nameless white dress. The first climax came in silence. But like every storm, that silence was only the warning before something no one saw coming. In a world where everything is measured by brand names, Harper walked with nothing but her honor and intellect. But was that enough in a crowd that only believed in last names and inherited wealth? She returned to her seat, right in the diamonds section, reserved for those whose fathers were senators, whose mothers were CEOs, or whose grandfathers once graced the pages of Forbes. She sat still, surrounded by whispers that no one even bothered to lower. Does Whitestone rent out seats by the hour now? Look at those shoes, probably props from some 90s movie. Came alone? Of course she did. Who would she even invite? A downpour of sneers, soft laughter, and razor-thin jabs. Each comment sliced away at the dignity of the young woman sitting silently, clutching her valedictorian plaque like a lifeline. Across the room, the spotlight illuminated a familiar face. Veronica Dane, daughter of the CEO of global fashion empire Danelle, draped in a couture gown studded with over 4,000 Swarovski crystals. Veronica didn't have to say much. Her cold gray eyes swept Harper from head to toe, as if trying to assess how badly this cheap item polluted her line of sight. Then, with a voice like silk, smooth but sharp as a scalpel, she spoke. "Scholarships should be reevaluated. We can't let the aesthetic of this ceremony be compromised by anomalies." Laughter erupted through the diamond section. It rang out like cathedral bells, not in celebration, but as a funeral toll for yet another soul being sacrificed on the altar of class. This time, it was Harper. And still, Harper didn't flinch. Her eyes remained fixed on the stage. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But her hands, clenching the honor plaque, began to tremble, ever so slightly. Like a wind ripple before a storm tears through the sky. Outside the hall, Angela Lewis sat gutted, hearing every word bleeding through the live stream. She was a janitor at a public health clinic. But her daughter, Harper, was the top graduate of the entire school. And now, everything Harper had worked for was being crushed by a simple white dress and the absence of a noble last name. Harper's silence wasn't weakness. It was quiet strength, standing firm in the face of society, screaming to erase anyone who didn't belong. But the storm wasn't over, and someone unexpected was about to enter and change everything. The graduation ceremony continued as if nothing had happened, as if removing a top student from the speaker's podium was merely a minor technical hiccup. But for Harper, each passing second felt like a silent execution. No one laid a finger on her, but every stare, every chuckle, every phone raised to record was a blade drawn without mercy. A group of male students stood up. Leading them was Preston Ward, son of a Wall Street banking mogul. He smirked, leaned toward Harper, and tossed a crumpled napkin at her feet. "Pick that up, janitor's daughter," Preston said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. Laughter broke out again. A girl beside him, dressed in deep crimson silk, plucked the straw from her drink and dropped it in front of Harper. "Here, a preview of your future workplace." Harper didn't move. She sat upright, both hands resting on her honor plaque, her gaze unwavering. But there was one thing no one in that crowd noticed. Her hands had gone pale from gripping too tightly, trying to stop them from trembling in shame. And then, as if to pour gasoline on a slow-burning fire, Professor Eleanor Winsley, the school's academic director, rose from the faculty row. She pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose and spoke with a tone dripping in condescension. "We appreciate the spirit of perseverance, but ambition must be tempered with a sense of place. Harper is a touching example of effort. However, St. Whitestone is a place that trains future leaders, not a platform for social work." The hall nodded in agreement. Some even clapped. Harper didn't react, but something in her eyes shifted, no longer pure hurt, but awakening. As if each blow the world had dealt her wasn't breaking her, it was forging a blade. And outside the grand hall, in the crowd watching the live stream, a strangled sob escaped a woman in a worn-out lavender cardigan. Angela Lewis had begun to cry. She couldn't step in to protect her daughter, but she saw it all. A room full of people executing Harper with words, with looks, with complicit silence. No one knew then that those exact moments, those humiliations, would become the prelude to a reversal unlike anything they'd seen. Because in just a few seconds, the doors to the hall would burst open. And the person who walked in wasn't coming to attend. He was coming to shatter every rule the privileged thought they controlled. Every silence has its limit. And when the grand doors at the back of the hall swung open, the creaking hinges sounded like the knock of destiny, bringing an end to the charade unraveling inside. Light from the hallway poured in, illuminating every dust particle suspended in the opulent air of Lancaster Hall. And the man who stepped through, each step slow, deliberate, drained the entire room of sound. Adrian Royce, 26 years old, the youngest CEO in the history of multinational giant Royce Global, known in financial circles as the ghost in the boardroom, walked in with the calm poise of a man who needed no introduction. A light gray suit was tailored to his towering frame, a crisp black tie, but it was his eyes, cold, sharp, and unrelenting, that froze the room. Phones were lowered. Laughter died like dry leaves in winter. And everyone who had moments ago delighted in Harper's humiliation, from Preston to Professor Winsley, stood paralyzed. Adrian didn't look at anyone but Harper. He walked straight to her, down the aisle of the silent diamond section, his hand extended mid-step, as if reaching into the mud to pull her out. His voice, deep and steady, rang through the hall like a bell of reckoning. "You're not going anywhere." A hush blanketed the room. Then he turned toward the event organizers, his eyes stripping away every layer of pretense. "I'm the principal benefactor of this year's St. Whitestone graduation ceremony. This school owes me for pulling it out of bankruptcy 3 years ago. And if Harper Lewis is not allowed to walk up and deliver her speech right now, I will not only pull all future funding, but I will release every email and message exchanged by those who plotted to remove her name from a list." His voice wasn't loud, but the weight of it turned faces pale. Sweat trickled down Professor Winsley's forehead. Preston backed up behind his chair. Veronica turned her face away, her gaze fleeing Adrian's like a spotlight too bright to bear. Then, Adrian stood before Harper. He bowed slightly, right there on the very stage from which he had just been cast down, but not out of pity. He looked into her eyes, still burning with pride, and said, gently, yet as sharp as a vow carved in stone, "You don't owe them anything. But today, the whole world will watch you rise, with your worn-out shoes and your unbreakable heart." Outside, the live stream crowd erupted. Cheers, shouts, choke sobs. And in that moment, that exact moment when Adrian led Harper back toward the podium, the glittering, privileged, diamond-encrusted world around them began to crack. For the first time, no one looked at Harper as the janitor's daughter. They saw her for what she truly was, a living declaration of dignity, intellect, and a kind of love no wealth could ever buy. Harper stood silently at the podium, the same podium she had been barred from minutes earlier, all because of a simple white cotton dress. No dramatic spotlight, no background music, but the air in the room had completely shifted. No one was laughing now. No one dared even clear their throat. Even the principal, who had stayed silent when Harper was removed from the program, now bowed his head, as if hiding from the gaze of the young woman before him. Harper took a deep breath. The honor plaque was still in her hands, but it no longer felt like a weight of pity. It was a sword forged from her mother's tears, sleepless study nights, and every silent humiliation she had endured alone. She looked directly at the front row, at the faces that had once sneered at her, now frozen in forced composure, and then out toward the cameras, knowing her mother was somewhere out there, watching every word. And then, in a voice that didn't shake, didn't rage, only resonated with pure feeling, Harper began to speak. "I'm not standing here to earn your approval. I don't need your applause. I'm here to say something that someone should have said a long time ago." She paused, swallowed hard, but her eyes never dimmed. "My mother is a janitor. She scrubbed every stair in that hospital so I could afford textbooks. She washed the clothes of patients day after day without ever once complaining. And today you laugh at my shoes? The shoes she bought with her night shift pay, just so I'd have something decent to wear to graduation." The room held its breath. A few eyes shimmered red. "You think I don't belong here? I had to study 3 times harder than you, because I didn't have anyone to call a professor, no father pulling strings. I topped this class through effort, not family business cards." Her voice was calm, but it pierced the room like an arrow. "I don't stand here alone. I carry the dreams of kids who never own designer clothes. Mothers are banned from the auditorium, of students dismissed, not because they weren't brilliant, but because they didn't have the right last name, the right legacy, the right scholarship. Only belief." A single tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She let it fall, as proof that her heart hadn't broken, it had remained unbent. And if this school, if this society still insists on measuring a person's worth by the shoes on their feet or the wallet in their hand, then let me be the first drop that cracks this polished glass of pretense. The entire hall rose to their feet, not by cue, not out of etiquette, but because their hearts had been shaken awake. They stood as if in apology, as if to bear witness. They had just seen a historic moment, not of graduation, but of awakening. Outside, in front of the live stream, her mother cried. But it was no longer the choked cry of pain. It was loud, full-bodied sobbing, of pride, of release, of a mother who knew. Every sacrifice she made had just turned into light on the very stage she was never invited to. The moment Harper stepped down from the podium was not the end. It was the beginning of a storm. But this time, it didn't sweep her away. It turned against those who had summoned it. Adrian Royce stepped into the center of the hall like a judge who didn't need a gavel. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His blade-sharp gaze silenced the entire St. Whitestone board. He pulled out his phone and connected it to the massive screen behind the stage. I didn't come here with a warning. I came here with evidence. Emails appeared, text messages, audio recordings, proof that Veronica Harrington, heiress to a global fashion empire, had paid $30,000 to the graduation committee to have Harper removed from a speaker list. That Professor Winsley, who once praised Harper at academic conferences, had been complicit in erasing her name from the honor roll. And at the head of the committee, the very person who blocked Harper at the microphone, had been promised a promotion by the Harrington family, if he handled it cleanly. The hall exploded, not in applause but in shock. Veronica stood up, trying to object, but her voice cracked, unsteady and faint. I just wanted to protect the school's image. Adrian cut her off, not even glancing her way. Image? You crushed someone's dignity to polish the shell of your own emptiness. Security had already stepped into the aisles. An aide walked up and handed the principal a formal document from Royce Global's executive board. Effective immediately, all funding to St. Whitestone is suspended indefinitely. A full investigation is requested into all irregularities tied to scholarship decisions. The principal's face drained of color. His words came out in broken fragments. We will take care of it. Adrian turned to Harper, still standing, calm, not triumphant, not vengeful. Her eyes held no resentment. And that, more than anything, gave weight to Adrian's next words. Words no one could deny. Harper doesn't need to be redeemed. She was never wrong. But all of you, you need to be reminded. No one has the right to decide someone's worth just because they walked into life wearing worn-out shoes. The first clap rang out from an elderly professor in the back row, Harper's former ethics lecturer. And then the whole room erupted, not for power, but for justice. The livestream crowd began chanting Harper's name. Social media was flooded with clips of her speech, all under a single hashtag. Hashtag honor is earned. Honor is earned, not granted. And right there, in the very place that once shoved her down like she was nameless, Harper stood witnessing an entire system bowing to the courage she carried in silence. The atmosphere in the hall felt frozen in time. Silence no longer served as a weapon against Harper. It had become a verdict, hanging like a sword over the heads of those who once looked down on her. Moments after Adrian Royce's speech and the irrefutable evidence displayed for all to see, St. Whitestone's Honor Council called an emergency tribunal. No more excuses. No more defenses. Veronica Harrington, the fashion heiress who once sat cross-legged on her pedestal of privilege, now stood alone in the center of the hall, her once perfect makeup powerless to hide the fear on her face. The ruling was read aloud with finality. Veronica Harrington is hereby suspended indefinitely, her honorary graduation title revoked, and she is banned from all future academic activities within the St. Whitestone system. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room, like an underground flood breaking through. But didn't stop there. Professor Winsley, once the smug moralist in disguise, was immediately suspended from teaching, facing internal investigation for aiding and abetting discriminatory conduct. The head of the graduation committee, the man who had tried to block Harper just before her speech, was terminated on the spot, with no severance, no ceremony. And when the principal, who had sat in complicit silence during Harper's public shaming, stepped onto the stage, he no longer carried the posture of power. He stood there, bowed deeply before Harper, his voice trembling. On behalf of the entire academy, I offer a sincere apology to Harper Morgan, someone we failed to protect when it was our duty to do so first. He extended his hand, and this time, Harper wasn't pulled down. She was invited back to the stage, not as an afterthought, but as the rightful valedictorian. The whole auditorium rose to its feet. No laughter, no side comments. Every eye followed Harper's steps, no longer lonely, but lifted by a tidal wave of justice that had finally risen. And the cotton dress, once the subject of scorn, now shimmered beneath the chandelier light, more radiant than any silk gown in the room. Harper stood once again at the podium, the very one she had been forbidden to approach just hours earlier. Her hand still held the diploma tightly, but not from fear or defense. Now, she held it with the knowledge that every scar she bore had been forged into strength. She lifted her head. The chandelier light reflected softly across her calm face. And when she spoke, her voice wasn't angry nor trembling. It was steady, quiet, and impossible to ignore. I'm not standing here because of my background. I'm standing here because of my mother, a silent janitor who taught me to bow before hard work, but never to bow before injustice. The room went breathless. Then, as if a current had passed through every seat, the applause began, first scattered, then rising in waves, crashing like the sea against the shore. Harper continued, each word redrawing the boundary between privilege and true worth. I used to think I didn't belong, but today I realize no one has the right to steal your dream just because you come from somewhere they don't understand. St. Whitestone doesn't need more gowns. It needs people willing to stand alone, so that someday they can stand for those too afraid to speak. By the time she finished, the audience was on their feet, all of them. Not just for Harper. They stood for themselves, for the good that had just been awakened in every silent heart. Adrian walked onto the stage. He took Harper's hand. He said nothing, just handed her a small velvet box. Inside, a simple engagement ring, understated, elegant, just like Harper herself. You never have to become anyone else, he said softly, because you are the reason I still believe this world can be fair and worth loving. Harper laughed through her tears. They embraced, surrounded by thunderous applause that refused to stop. Outside, Maria, Harper's mother, held her live-streaming phone close to her chest, weeping uncontrollably, but not from pain. There were tears of pride, of release. On the screen, the hashtags #HarperRises and #DignityIsPower began trending worldwide. That very week, Adrian Royce announced the founding of the Harper Morgan Scholarship Fund, dedicated to students from underprivileged backgrounds with extraordinary determination. Initial pledge, $10 million. In her first interview after graduation, when asked if she had any regrets, Harper simply smiled and said, "No, if I could choose again, I'd still wear the cotton dress. Because I didn't come here to please them. I came to change how they see." She needed no diamonds. She was the light. Some wounds aren't visible to the eye, but they leave scars deep in the hearts of those who've been hurt. And some victories don't require trophies, just one person brave enough to stand up for their dignity. The greatest lesson from Harper's story is this: you don't have to be born into wealth to deserve respect. Dignity isn't validated by designer labels. It's proven by how you live and how you confront injustice. The message behind this story: sometimes all it takes is one person to rise at the right moment, in the right way, for the truth to be uncovered, and for justice, even delayed, to break an entire system wide open. My personal reflection: this story made me think deeply about how modern society often defines people by appearance or background. Harper didn't just reclaim her stage. She reclaimed the voice of every person silenced by prejudice. And Adrian, a man of power, proved that kindness and justice can and should coexist with success. If you've ever felt looked down on because of where you came from, how you looked, or because you didn't fit into a polished world, remember, you don't have to become someone else. Kindness, resilience, and dignity are already the light that sets you apart. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been judged for being different? Do you believe justice will find its way, even if it's late? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded. They are enough. They are worthy. And don't forget to subscribe to Toch Story, where every story is a heartbeat, a reminder that goodness still matters. Toch Story, where the overlooked rise and shine.